Now welcome to another edition of Let's Talk Some Star Wars, where this time we'll be taking a look at and discussing the results of the poll that essentially asked you, what should the fate of Ahsoka Tano be, or maybe what should it have been? Do you think her story should have ended somewhere already, or, as is of course happening, should she be getting her own series? And as usual, the discussion will come from me reading and then responding to your comments, so in order to get to that, let's begin with the poll results, where we'll see that 3% of voters thought she should have never been created in the first place, 4% think the best place for her story to have ended was to be killed during Order 66, 26% then think it should have ended with her duel in Rebels against Darth Vader, that she should have been killed by him, 62% then agree her story should go on and are happy she's getting her own series, and another final 4% feel it should have been a different fate for her altogether. Okay, and before getting to your comments, let me just once again quickly say thank you to everyone who votes, comments, and watches these or any of my videos. It is all greatly appreciated. Also, a big thank you to everyone who supports this channel over on Patreon. And now let's kick this off, as always, with the top-rated comment, which this time came to us from Mitchell Hughes, who said, Ahsoka is one of my top 5 favorite Star Wars characters, but I feel like her death should have been at Vader's hand in Rebels. It would have made sense to why she wasn't in the original trilogy. Plus, for me, it adds to the notion that Anakin's master nor apprentice could save him and bring him back to the light. And to kind of quote George Lucas himself,
again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme, every stanza kind of rhymes with the last one.
There would have been some poetry to that, or it would have rhymed if Vader both kills his former master and his former apprentice, that there would have been this extra degree of tragedy to his story, that neither one could save him, that nothing could save him until Luke does it. Though currently, it could change in the Kenobi series, but currently, and interestingly enough, Obi-Wan never actually tries to save Anakin. He simply does what he must both times he faces him. One time trying to kill him in Revenge of the Sith, and the other purposely losing and dying to him in A New Hope. So we could say there's also some interesting poetry in that, or is before potentially being changed by the Kenobi series and another encounter between these two. But anyway, and saving that discussion for another time perhaps, I do think that, yes, there is something fitting or even perfect about Ahsoka dying to Vader while still believing in Anakin, her still believing in Anakin. I do think, looking at it from just one side, the Anakin-Vader story side, that it serves the story extremely well, that it's another piece of this beautiful tragedy that is his life or the life of Anakin/Darth Vader. But then the question has to be, is another piece of his story, another tragic piece heaped onto the already tragic story of Anakin, is that better or more important than doing something else with Ahsoka? Something that maybe gets her out from under the shadow of Anakin to develop into a character beyond just being the former apprentice of Anakin Skywalker, which the World Between Worlds episode of Rebels does seem to imply is going to happen, that she's truly ready to move on when she tells Ezra,
"You can't save your master, and I can't save mine."
Though the interesting thing about that, about Ahsoka growing beyond Anakin, is that Hayden Christensen is confirmed to be in the Ahsoka series, and Bryce Dallas Howard even recently said that the show would reward fans of the Clone Wars, meaning, or when put together, means, or I think means, we're going to have quite a few references or flashbacks to the Clone Wars and their time together. Which, sure, especially for newer fans or those who don't know Ahsoka very well, or maybe at all, it's important to get that part of her story across to them. They need to establish that relationship because it is a huge part of Ahsoka's overall story. And usually you have to know where a character's been before you can truly understand and thus start to care about where they're going. But as much as I do enjoy and love the Clone Wars series and the whole Anakin-Ahsoka dynamic in it, I do think part of the point of the Ahsoka series needs to be discovering who she is without Anakin, or after Anakin, or free of his shadow, if you will. And so I really hope, after getting some very likely to be cool flashbacks and interactions between Ahsoka and the Force Ghost of Anakin maybe, and that if the series does go on for multiple seasons, that it does truly become the Ahsoka series, that she's not only there to shine by herself, but that she becomes something beyond the apprentice of Anakin Skywalker. And that they also managed to give us an ending that is really worthy of not giving us the ending they could have in Rebels, where she does die at the hands of Vader. Alright, and all that kind of brings us to this comment from Al Carbo, who said, George Lucas stressed to Dave Filoni that Ahsoka needed to be killed off in a tragic fashion before Episode 3, to both close any continuity holes and to contribute to Anakin's eventual fall. Unfortunately, Dave Filoni didn't listen. He became so attached to his fictional character, he couldn't do it. He couldn't kill her in the Clone Wars, and he couldn't even kill her in Rebels, which I think is a real shame, as Ahsoka has basically been a walking plot hole ever since. For example, Yoda told Luke he was the last Jedi in Episode 6. Then also we have this comment from Jonathan Watson, who said, time travel, enough said. I really didn't care for how they handled that. They could have found another way for her to survive if they were that desperate. Ahsoka really won me over as a character, but sometimes it does feel like Filoni is too attached to his character and won't let her go. Even when appropriate, she tends to make the canon pretty messy. If they can at least make something significant out of her in the upcoming series, then I might change my mind. Seeing how the Book of Boba Fett series went down, my confidence is a bit shaken. Also here we have this comment from Resident TK007, who said, Ahsoka surviving her duel with Vader and the way that was executed was perhaps the most blatant example of a creator not wanting to kill off their own character, yet wanting to put them in a situation where they should have been killed. If Filoni didn't want Ahsoka to die, then she should have never had that duel with Vader in the first place. And yeah, I do think a case could be made that Filoni is having a bit of trouble with Yoda's lesson about learning to let go of what you fear to lose. I mean, when asked if hearing her voice, Ahsoka's voice in Episode 9, along with all the other Jedi, or should I say all the dead Jedi, if that meant she was also dead, Filoni said it didn't necessarily mean that she could still be alive then, which would then be the second time we were told that there was a last Jedi, but Ahsoka was technically still out there, though technically not a Jedi because she claims or declares herself not to be one, even though she basically still acts like one.
I am no Jedi.
And speaking of that, of Ahsoka not being a Jedi, George Lucas, as said by Dave Filoni himself, was in the Ahsoka dies camp and wanted her to come back to the Order after walking away from it, so that she would be around during Order 66. And to keep going with the whole Jedi attachment thing a bit more here, I do think Filoni is obviously very possessive when it comes to the character, and that he feels a sense of pride when it comes to her too. I mean, she has truly become one of the most popular and beloved characters in the franchise. He personally created a fan-favorite character in Star Wars. That's gotta be a pretty cool feeling and one not easy to let go of. Then there's also the fact that she had a rather, shall we say, rough start. There were plenty of people who didn't like her in the first couple seasons of the Clone Wars or in the Clone Wars movie, as well as people against her even before that hated just the idea of Anakin having a Padawan during the Clone Wars and wanted to reject her immediately. And yet a lot of people eventually came around and, again, really started to like the character, to love the character. And so I do think there could be a desire to kind of keep proving himself with the character, or keep proving the character, that Filoni really wants her to become far more than just a side note in Vader's story, which is what it seems Lucas wanted her to be, that he instead wants that to only be the start, or for her time with Anakin to be a side note in her story. Alright, and moving on now, we have this comment from Debrickashaw, who said, I really liked her death in Rebels and thought that the means of her survival was too much, but now that it's over with, I just hope they capitalize on it with a quality story. Her live-action appearances have been cool, but a lot of that could be the impact of seeing her in live action. I really want to see her first meeting with Luke, as well as her interact with Anakin's Force Ghost. Also then, we have a comment here from S. Fisher 1993, who said, I enjoyed her appearance in The Mandalorian and think Rosario is a fantastic choice for the role, but even so, her final confrontation with Vader was a powerful moment. To save her life via time travel kinda diminishes the intensity. So, as excited as I am about her live-action TV show, I still voted that she should have died by Vader's hand. Sounds cold, but it would have been a fitting way to show us how totally gone Anakin was at this point. Then here we also have a comment from Happy Birthday Paulie, who said, one could argue Clone Wars was close to being her own show. Judging by the results so far, a lot of people don't seem to believe in getting too much of a good thing or less being more. As for my vote, I'd have liked to have seen her defeated by Vader. It'd have given their dynamic a tragic but poetic resolution, as well as further showcased how little of Anakin's humanity remained, which would in turn bolster even more Luke's triumph in redeeming his father. And that is a great point. Ahsoka's failure, as well as Obi-Wan's reluctance to even try as far as we know, does strengthen what Luke was able to accomplish. It does make it even more powerful. And the funny thing is about this poll, or maybe I should say the comments and this poll, is most of the comments in general, and especially the top-rated ones, were all people saying that they think Ahsoka should have died to Vader in Rebels, but a lot of them also say that they're okay or fine with her also getting her own show. Which really leads me to believe that if I'd put an option asking if you think Ahsoka dying to Vader would have worked or was the best choice for her, but you're also excited that she's getting her own series and you're okay with that as well, I think that would have won the poll. That would have been the most top-rated option. Alright, and that said, let's move on to this comment from Bruce Kenobi, who said, Ahsoka is a great character and she really gives heart to the Clone Wars, but we are reaching a point where she shows up everywhere but the original trilogy, and she is becoming problematic because of it. If we are to believe her to be this beacon of what a good Force user should be, what a hero should be, she is starting to creep around Obi-Wan's spot in the story, the mentor, or even Luke's, the hero, and she should be the lesson in The Path Not Taken, or the wrong hero for this moment in the galaxy. As it pains me to say, we have to let her go. Her time has passed. And I did go into this in a video the other day where I asked why Ahsoka is not around in the original trilogy, and yes, I realize it's because she isn't created until after the original trilogy, but that doesn't answer the question of where she is in the story. Anyway, I see a lot of people asking or wondering, and I've wondered it too, why did Dave Filoni create such a elaborate way to save Ahsoka? He could have either left it vague or shown them, her and Vader, both having to flee because the temple's about to explode. There were 100 different ways to explain why Vader doesn't end up killing Ahsoka. But instead of going with any of those, he instead introduces the world between worlds and time travel. He makes it where Ezra is the one that saves her, and then he makes her promise to come and find him after.
Keep going! You can make it!
When you get back, come and find me!
I will! I promise!
And I think maybe, if not likely, part of the answer for doing it this way is it will explain where she was during the original trilogy, which is out looking for Ezra, that she's going to keep the promise above all else, and she'll be in, I don't know, probably the unknown regions of the galaxy looking for where the Purrgil dropped him off, and she'll be doing it for years during the events of the original trilogy, which of course also conveniently takes Ezra out of play during the original trilogy as well, but allows him or both of them to come back after. Now, you could certainly still ask if we needed to do something that elaborate, that there had to be another way to explain why they were both gone, or yeah, you could also have them both die, and that's also an easy solution. But either way, I do think the world between worlds was, for whatever reason, what Filoni came up with, not to only sort of save both Ahsoka and Ezra for later on, but to explain their absence during the original trilogy. Alright, and now let's get to just a few final comments before wrapping this up, starting with this one from Cole Arbatina, who said, I love her and I'm excited to see where the series goes, but her dying against Vader would have been a perfect, heartbreaking ending to the character. Hopefully what they do with her going forward makes it worth losing a tragic moment. Then there's this one from Munchray, who said, it's incredible just how okay I'd be with her dying in Rebels. It's honestly a pretty epic way to go out, and the fact that she survived that thanks to time shenanigans is honestly just a bonus for me. Still really looking forward to the show, but I do wish other Clone Wars characters like Ventress got this much love, because trying to explain the ending of her story to a friend is very frustrating. Next up, we have this comment from Pyro the Ahsoka Simp, who said, having Ahsoka go out fighting Vader would have been a really tragic and unfortunate way for her to go out, and not in a bad writing way, but in an emotional and painful way that is still satisfying from a narrative point of view. That very easily could have benefited the Vader-Anakin conflict even further, having the blood of his former apprentice on his hands, knowing just how much he truly cared about her, as illegitimate family could very well cause him to become imbalanced with the dark and light sides of the Force to a greater degree. Then, when he redeems himself in Return of the Jedi, it can be even easier to see why he wasn't about to let the very last person he had left be killed by the evil that pushed him to do so many awful things. If he intentionally had Ahsoka killed because of his own hands, he wasn't about to make the same mistake of intentionally letting Darth Sidious kill his own son. Then next up we have this one from Noah Schumann, who said, I think Ahsoka multiple times was going to die or never be mentioned again, like Clone Wars Season 5 finale or Rebels Season 2 finale, but they just kept coming up with a great idea to do with her, thus why she keeps coming back, a lesson the sequels should have learned with Palpatine. We also then have this comment from Christopher Grant, who said, I'm hopeful that Ahsoka actually has a happy ending someday. So many of my favorite characters like Obi-Wan and Anakin lead tragic lives leading up to their deaths. It would be refreshing for a Star Wars character to finally have a happy ending. And finally here we have this comment from Austin Shaw, who said, the way they ended Season 5 of Clone Wars was the perfect opportunity to end her story. It was a sad moment, but it was the right moment for the character. And then they brought her back in Rebels. That was fine. It fit into the story and still felt like a natural progression of the character, even made the character more endearing to me. And then they brought her back again in Clone Wars Season 7. I don't feel that that was needed, but it worked phenomenally well in my opinion. But then they brought her back in Mando. Like, okay, Disney, Dave, I love this character, but can we not have her in Star Wars for like 5 minutes? Let me see another character's story, please. That's why Mando and Bad Batch were so successful, I think. They told newer stories with newer characters. But at the end of the day, do I want to see the new Ahsoka show? Yes, I do. I love the character, but I honestly hope this story will be a conclusion for the character. One that isn't cheap, but something similar to the end of Clone Wars Season 5. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think Ahsoka's fate should have been. So again, leave your comments below, let's talk some Star Wars, and until next time, thanks for watching.